Hello and welcome to the Legendary Ladies podcast. This time around, we are going to be talking about a recent series question mark season question mark finale, and that is the series Ted Lasso, which is on Apple TV. Are they? Is it
It's on
Apple
Apple
TV
TV.
or is it Apple TV Plus? I can't. Everything
I think
is
it might be
Plus
Apple
now.
TV Plus. I always see a plus sign
Yeah,
when
because
those
I
things
think that
happen.
technically the Apple TV is that, like, thing that you put on the top of your TV.
True.
Strange naming convention, but I guess it's, better than Max,
It is
so
Plus. It's
got
Apple
that.
TV Plus.
Apple TV Plus. So Ted Lasso just finished up its 3rd season. It's in a weird spot because they have not there are rumors that this was the final season. It seemed like it's the final season. It
I'm
ended in a
pretty sure
way
it could
that
be.
that implied it's the final season, and yet no one will confirm whether or not it's the final season. I suspect that Apple is saying, "Please make more Ted Lasso in some variety,"
We have nothing
and
else.
like, "We please, sir," and the creative team is like, "I don't know."
There's a
So
writer's strike too. I think
there's
that
the
doesn't help the
writer's strike,
situation.
I think, yeah, so the creative team can't, like, go out for interviews and, like, answer questions about, like, "Is this it?" So we kind of just have to deal with, like, what's on screen. So we thought we would talk about this season of Ted Lasso, but also more specifically, this season of Ted Lasso was a little bit more queer than previous seasons, which were not queer at all.
Which
So
was a big criticism of the show. I remember
yeah.
because I watched Ted Lasso. I actually binge watched season 1 and 2, I wanna say. I think this was the first season where I watched it we watched it
Ah.
episode by episode, and, yeah, we watched season 1 and 2, and I remember, like, searching and being like, "Is it" every show has a little gay. Is this gonna ever get a little gay? And
Who's
they,
gay
like
here?
yeah, who's gay here? And they're obviously, like, the 2 characters do end up being queer. They kinda hinted very little, in previous seasons that they could be queer, and then I guess they just went out on a bang, and they're like, "Listen to people," and they're like, "Yeah, why not make it a little gay?" And they made it really
Yeah,
gay.
it got very gay. It got gay as hell this season. So we're gonna talk about how the queer relationships in this season, how were they done?
Yeah.
And then kind of the season overall, because I think that I have some some hot takes, which I thought
Ooh.
I really enjoyed the season. Every time I would watch an episode, I'd be like, man, I love visiting the Ted Lasso universe. I just like watching this show. It's just like enjoyable. But man, this season's been bumpy.
See, I really like this season, so that's gonna be really and again, I'm always so
Mm.
negative about everything, uh, but
Now
no,
this time I get to be the cat of the
yeah, you get to
situation.
be me. No, I really like this season. It's funny because I was doing my newsletter for, and we'll go into and this kind of ties into the queerness of the show as well. I was doing my newsletter and I usually talk about like media consumed. I was talking about Ted Lasso and I like really tried hard because I didn't know how to get my thoughts out about like why I think Ted Lasso works so much as a show. And I said, what's so interesting, especially as you kind of go into the finale, it's kind of an anti-love story, right? Like it's like they kind of build up to these
Yeah.
moments where you think it's going to be about romance. And I'm sure we'll talk about Roy Kent and Keely. And that's like, especially like those type of shows, it always would end on like, they go to the airport and they're like, oh, this, let's be together. Same thing for Ted and Rebecca, literally the airport scene,
Yes.
but they're like, no, it was never a show about that. And that goes into Ted's character who, is working out a divorce. And that's really what the show is about, is kind of finding love in yourself. And that's what's super interesting about this whole season. Again, a season that had so much to do with queerness, and especially through Keely's character, who, again, I think it could have been really defined by her love triangle, but was more defined with her friendship with Rebecca and herself. Like there's this big moment in the end where she gets to choose between Jamie and Roy, and she's like, I don't need to choose between any of you. And again, I think Rebecca and Ted really show that as well, where it's like, maybe they were the obvious people to be together and they don't go that route. And it really is about kind of taking care of yourself. And I think Roy is also a big part of that as well, where in the end, he's like, I tried so hard to change. There's a wonderful scene where he's like, I tried so hard to change as a person and I never changed. And like, well, why would you want to change? And he's like, well, because I want to be a better person. Who says you're not being a better person? You don't have to change. You just have to be a better part of yourself. And I think that's really interesting that his story doesn't end up in Keely's arms. He's like, oh, maybe that was the thing that was preventing me from being a better version of myself. He goes to therapy. I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting ending to a character that is so driven by his romantic plot.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about Ted Lasso is, like, how seriously the show takes mental health and, like, therapy, and, like, for an upbeat show about, like, the most optimistic man in the world, I think it really tackles that idea of, like, toxic positivity, that like you can be
Mhm.
so positive that you're just like straight up ignoring all the problems in your life and making it kind of feel like, oh no, like if you meet Ted you probably think, oh, what a happy go lucky guy. But actually, in season 2 especially, we got in, and this season, in season 3, got into his demons and like how hard things were for him. And like, really, I like that they dug into like the mental health of it all. They did that with Roy as well, where he's like, maybe I need to like work on myself. So I like that ending for him for sure. Um, I saw a comment from Abby that you put up on screen. It said, Abby said, I thought this season was bumpy too, story wise, but I still really enjoyed it. Yeah, that's the funny thing for me for Ted Lasso is that like I can think, I can like take a step back and have like a really critical critique of it. And then be like, but I still enjoyed like every second that I watched the show. Like it didn't make me mad. It didn't make me go, ugh, like I'm gonna tune out of this show. Like sometimes when shows like fumble stuff, I'm like, I don't know if I still have time for this show.
What do you think? I mean, I guess I could see it can, and we'll even go into the queer stuff a bit, but I could kind of see maybe the bumpiness of like, why did you introduce Jack?
Yeah, I think we'll get into that with the queer stuff. I will say, like, just to preview my hot take, the Nate storyline didn't work for me in like any
Interesting.
facet of the situation because I
Even
feel,
how it ended?
yeah, I think almost especially how it ended because they worked so hard in season 2 on that heel turn where he like kind of becomes like a little bit of a villain, right? Like he really starts treating people badly, but only people who are like have less power than him, which feels like a
Mhm.
very very realistic way to go mad with power. It's like you're not going to scream at your boss, you're going to scream at your
No.
assistant. And it felt very like, they worked so hard to make him kind of a jerk. And then we come into this season and it didn't feel like he ever like was proactive in his own like turnaround and his own redemption story. Like he got a girlfriend and that was supposed to make me think that he was like a better guy. And his girlfriend, like her personality was like girlfriend.
Yeah,
And
she didn't have much of a
we
she
didn't
didn't
learn
do much.
anything much about her. I don't really understand why she liked him or why he liked her.
I
They didn't,
definitely don't know why she liked him. I think he liked her because she was
'cause she was
pretty.
pretty. Yeah, it was a
Not
very
that I'm saying
strange.
he's ugly, but I
No,
just think
no. And, like, I think the actor is really good. I just think that the material he was working with was, like, so strange and, like, just not that linear in terms of, like, if I wanted to redeem him, I would have made him make some, like, revelations about how I was treating other people, make some
Mhm.
amends, do some, apologizing. I don't think he apologizes until the finale when he's talking to Ted and, like, starts crying. But, like, at that point, he had kind of already resumed his old life and everybody had already forgiven him before he even asked for forgiveness. And so it just kind of felt to me like they dropped the ball sort of on several times. And like I think one of my bigger critiques of the season is that like big things would happen between episodes. So
Right.
like off screen. So like you would end one episode and you would start the next episode and you were like, "Oh, Nate quit the other team that he was working with," but we didn't see him like come to that decision. We didn't see him confront Rupert and quit.
Yeah, that I remember feeling confused because I
I
watched it
thought
with
I
my
missed an
family.
episode.
Yes, and we all my brother, we watched it over the phone with him, and
Yeah.
he, like, unmuted himself. He's like, "Did we miss an episode or something?" Like, "Well, why is it starting here?" I said, "No, I think they're doing that on purpose," and that was the one scene where, like, "Did we miss something?"
Yeah, I feel like there were a couple, and I that's the one I remember the most, but I think that there were a couple of instances this season where like big character moments were happening off screen, and even Ted um telling Rebecca that he's going to leave and
Yes.
go home, that
Mhm.
happened off screen. That happened between the episodes.
Right.
So, like, that was another one where I was like, really, this is like kind of the emotional crux of the season. It's like what the season's been building up to. And you're going to just like leave that off screen. Abby says that I'm hitting 100% of what she was feeling. But like, yeah, it just felt bumpy in that way where it's like these big character moments that you've been building up, that you've been spending time building up, like we want to see those because you've been building them up. We want to see Ted tell Rebecca that he's leaving. We don't want it to have happened between episodes, between scenes. And like there were some things where they would just like info drop that like a big major development with a character happened like off screen, and I would be like, why would you not show that?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's certain parts where I think it worked. Like I think when like Rebecca and Ted like wake up in the morning, I think it's the final episode. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, did they sleep together? And
And
then
you're supposed to
obviously
be,
they
oh
don't.
my goodness, oh my goodness.
They really, really want you to think that Rebecca and Ted are gonna be together.
It's so funny because I'm sure that there are people out there that, like, probably were really
Like
into
them,
that
I guess.
relationship and
Yeah.
shipped them, I would assume, and for those people, I guess the show treated them quite cruelly, but, like, but, I mean, by the time you get to the finale, had they ended up together, that would have
I would
been
have not
a
liked it.
a puzzling turn of events with, like, almost no lead up to it, right? Like, it was like you could definitely see where there were scenes where it looked like they were, growing closer or something, but, like, there wasn't a lot of buildup on that relationship. If they had suddenly turned in, like, the finale when she goes to see him at the airport and it had, like, become, like, Love Actually, like, I would have been confused.
I like their friendship a lot more anyways, and I think the one thing that did confuse me, not the ending in general, I think with Ted, because he did not show up to his friend's wedding, and you're like, "Why?"
Yes. What why? Obviously, the actor is there. You could have put him in that scene in that terrible green screen
I
with
know, it's a
everybody
green
else.
screen, you're
One of
good.
truly one of the worst green screens I've ever seen, except for that, like, one episode of Pretty Little Liars where, Spencer is, like, in
Yes,
Washington. That's
yes.
still my all-time favorite green screen. I saw that at
At New
New
York
York
Comic
Con
Con,
at New
me
York
too,
were you
yeah,
I think we were there together,
yeah.
and I've never seen a room, like, burst out into laughter like it did when she showed up in
I
that
wonder
green
if they were
screen.
expecting it. I wonder if they're like, "Oh, no,
I w
we did
Yeah,
this
I
wrong."
wonder if the creative team was like, "Oh, man, we did a great job on this episode," and then they got to watch everybody just laugh at their terrible green screen, and we're just like,
It
"Uh-oh."
It probably doesn't feel great. I think with
Probably
Ted
doesn't
Lasso, at least,
know.
and I guess even Pretty Little Liars, like there's this almost there's this cringy factor of some certain aspects of Pretty Little Liars where you're like that kind of works and it makes it funny. And then with Ted Lasso, it is a comedy show, so you're like, oh, that's kind of funny, I guess, you know?
Yeah, it's like, "Sure, this is terrible green screen. Well, I'm just gonna roll with it." Yeah, I saw some people, saying, like, questioning whether or not that whole sequence was a dream because
Supposedly the writers said, and somehow they interviewed them that it wasn't.
interesting. Yeah, because I could almost buy that dream interpretation because, like, Ted is on the plane, he goes
He
to
wakes
sleep.
up.
You see all the stuff about, like, what's happening in London, in London, or, like, in the UK, and then he wakes up at the end of it and, like, goes about his day, and, like, I could see the dream interpretation 100%, especially because, like, why wasn't he at Beard's wedding? That's so strange.
Yeah, because I think the writers are saying like, well, you need to show the importance of him being with his son. I'm like, he still has friends. He could go visit.
He
He's
could
not
still pop
going.
off for a weekend, jeez.
Yeah, he's still, and that's the thing that I thought was such a weird ending. And he's like, oh yeah, I had this like 3 years of my life here, but now I can never see them again. I'm like, but
Yeah.
there's phones. There's like
Phones,
you can
there's
still talk.
vacations, like, your son is on a American school
Yeah,
schedule.
go there for a
You got the
month.
whole summer, like, what, you can't go there and, take a month off or a couple weeks and take Henry over to, like, the UK? Like, it did seem very final. He's like, "I'm leaving forever." It's like, I mean, he's
You
also
don't have to.
growing up, like, you could probably come back in, like, 5 years when he's in,
Yeah,
late high school and everything would probably be okay.
and
It felt very final for
and
some
his job
reason.
seems like he's just a soccer coach for his son's soccer team, which I
Yes,
thought
yes.
hysterical that he's not a good soccer player. And I was like, that's at least funny.
That is really good.
Yeah, so I like that. But yeah, there's certain parts of the ending where like, oh, it's weird. But I think the secondary characters, I mean, they definitely leave off to see like, oh, maybe there's some spin-off potential here because you have Roy now being the head, but then also I want to see that lady soccer show. So I think that's
Yes.
fascinating.
I thought that that was a great pitch for, like, another it did feel like that air quotes "dream sequence," basically when you just see, like, a bunch of, like, snapshots of, like, what's going on. That did feel like pitching a bunch of different ideas of what could be spin-offs and be like, "Does anybody into this one? Anybody into this one?" And I will put it on record that the lady soccer spin-off would be great.
Well, because the reason I like that more than the Roy Kent show is because it's so different from Ted Lasso. I think with if you get the Roy Kent show, it's like, well, where's Ted? This is a weird show. It's the same characters. But with the girls, you could just make a completely different show, and it's like kind of in the same. You just have two of those characters who already work really well together. And you can have another love triangle, maybe a love square. Keely falls in love with another soccer player.
And I feel like you could have, like, Roy Kent be involved in that, like, you could keep around most of the characters because it would happen at the same probably at the same stadium, it would be, like, happening around the same area, it would be, the same team, but, like, the women's version of it, so you
Yeah.
could keep all of the secondary characters that everybody loves that are not Ted Lasso, and like create a show from that. Yeah, I think that was the one the spin-off sort of pitch that seems to be happening that I was like, I feel like that one would have like would be the most different, but also could like incorporate the most stuff that we already like from the show.
I wonder how much the odds are though that we have a writing strike right now and the show ended. Is there even odds that we're gonna get this spinoff? Because I just feel like it's such horrible timing.
It's bad timing. I will say I feel like Ted Lasso was such an unexpected hit for Apple
Mhm.
TV Plus.
An only
Uh
hit, maybe.
and yeah, I mean Apple, I can't think Severance on
In
Apple
the morning
TV.
show, I guess. I
The
know
morning
people.
show, I mean, people like it. I don't feel like it's ever been, like, part of the conversation, like, I haven't seen people
No.
go like, "Oh my god, the you have gotta see this crazy episode of The Morning Show." I've never
I
heard
just hear
that.
it's also a little gay. That is our next show we're gonna watch because we're waiting
Oh,
for only
nice.
only murders in the building we're waiting for. So we're like,
Great
why
show.
not? And my brother works in television, so and
That'll be
that
yeah,
side of
that'll be
TV.
fun.
So
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, that might be a fun show to watch because I was like, or we might watch White Lotus season one because we only watched season two.
Oh my god.
Because-
So, season 1 is also great. It's I feel like season 2, like, took it to the next level of being unhinged,
Mhm.
but season 1 is also quite insane. So I think you guys would love season 1.
Yeah, we're trying to find our next show because we like watching something as a family, and it forces me to watch some television as well. But yeah, getting into I guess let's get into the queerness of it all.
Yeah.
Let's save Keely for a second because I think we
Okay.
want to save Keely for a
Yeah, because
second.
I
But
feel like the Keeley storyline, I'm gonna have probably more critiques on it. The Colin story was the other
mm,
queer storyline of the season. So we find out like what was it, mid-season that actually there's a gay player on the team, and it is Colin. And then we sort of follow his storyline as he tries to figure out like what he wants to do about that, if he wants to like he's obviously trying not to have his teammates find out. We don't know how closeted he is, we just know he is with his teammates and with the team in general, which actually leads him to bond with Trent Krim, the independent,
yeah, who saw
who
that coming?
I know, which is
Not that he was gay. I don't. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense, but
my
not just like
favorite.
the connection was interesting.
I love that they had Trent Krim, embedded with them the whole season. I thought
Mm,
I love that character, I love the actor, and, like, having him, like, write a book about the team was such a fun way to keep him around and actually give him some stuff to do.
it
One of
makes
my
sense.
favorite.
There's a lot of sports teams that do that. So
Exactly, and people people write these kinda, like, tell-all books about sports teams all the time, so it makes sense from, like, his perspective that he would be doing this. I did think it was funny that, like, I will say, like, probably the next episode after you find out he's gay, like, we didn't know this, or at
Yes,
least I don't
the
think
mug.
I knew this. Yeah, before that episode where he talks to Colin and says like, "Hey, I saw you with like I don't know if that was his boyfriend or just like somebody who's hooking up with, but like I saw you and like do you want to talk about it?" And like he reveals that he's gay. Afterwards, Trent Krim gets so gay. Trent Krim gets the gayest I've ever seen. He's just holding around like a gay mug. He's constantly wearing a Dolly Parton shirt. I was like, "Wait a minute." Like I'm not trying to be judgmental, but like Trent Krim was not this gay up until
No,
he talked to Colin and then he was just like, "You know what? I think I'm going
let's
to take
do
my own
it.
advice. I'm going to become the gayest a person can be."
He really did, and he took it to heart. I like the arc. I think yeah, there it wasn't a perfect arc, but I like that it went in a direction that most of these stories wouldn't go, right? Because I think it'd be like, oh well, how do I out myself to the press? And it's like, no, I just like, how do I tell my friends? And I didn't know how to feel at first about his friend, the captain. What's it?
Mhm.
McAdoo, I think his name is.
Oh, yeah, I think it's McAdoo.
Yeah. He like, he sees it and you're like, oh my God, he's gonna be homophobic and like obviously he's not, but he's just like, oh, why didn't you tell me? And I like their navigation of their friendship, I thought was interesting. And then you do the kiss in the end, which like fine, that was good. I liked it. I thought it went in, it sidestepped some cliches, and I think they did a pretty solid job with it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those stories like that, it's hard because like on one hand you do kind of feel like some of the stuff is like a cliche. It's like, oh, it's a sports story and like should he come out, should he not come out, but like it's a cliche for a reason, right? It's
And
still
it still
very
happens.
still
There's
very
very Go on.
I was going to say it's still very very hard to be a professional sports player who is queer, who is gay. It's not easy.
There's also very little sports players that are out, like, at all.
Exactly, and, like, so it's, like, one of those things where it's, like, yeah, you could critique it and say, "Oh, it feels a little cliche, and it feels like, oh, okay, it's just like a coming out story," but, like, in the professional sports world, like, there are still big repercussions for, like, being open about your sexuality. It's, like, not easy to be out as a professional sports player.
Especially a guy. I think, there's, like, look at every
I was gonna
WNBA
say
player, they're all gay.
that's true. I should probably amend that this is like men's sports. Like women's sports,
Yeah.
I feel like there's almost like a
You have to come out straight.
yeah, exactly. Because you kind of assume like, oh yeah, of course, like they're pretty gay, right? And they're like, I'm sorry, I like men. I'm so
It's so
sorry.
interesting. That should
Yeah,
be a story there. That's because you
that
really
would be
do. There's
fun.
certain people, like it's you look at WNBA, and I like sometimes I'll search like, oh, is that person gay? I'm just curious, and then you look and you're like, oh, they're straight, and you're like, they can't be straight. What? And then the person like comes out, they're like, yeah, I'm straight, and it's just like, wow.
It's like I have a very painful admission. I I'm attracted to men. I know it is terrible. But yeah, it is funny that like, it's for women almost because I think it's because like sports are kind of still seen as like a man thing. So like a woman doing a man thing, like, oh yeah, probably she's queer. But like male sports players, there really does seem to be still a lot of prejudice around you know, coming out and being open about your sexuality as a gay professional sports player.
And it all goes to, I mean, it's the cliche, but the locker room aspect of it all is like, oh, you're looking at me, like stuff like that. Like, there's still some, like, so much internalized homophobia and stuff like that. But also, like, it's so interesting to hear from people who are out, like, after, like, very few people are out now. They're like, no one really, like, it's, it's the idea that people in the locker room already know you're gay. Like, they'll tell your teammates, and they're like, but I just can't be out into the world. So it does seem like there's, like, people that are gay that you just don't know are gay, but everyone else does know they're gay.
It's like it's like the sports, like, don't ask, don't tell. Like, some
Yeah.
people it's like probably, like, open secrets within the sports world that,
Mm,
like, maybe team members or friends or something like that within know, but, like, it's not an open thing. Because also I think, like, the culture and the fandom around some sports is very can be kind of toxic in some ways,
yeah.
like, is a little bit tinged with some of them, a
It's,
little
like,
bit
not
tinged
worth
with, like,
coming out at that
toxic
point.
masculinity, and then, like, yeah, do you wanna get, like, heckled and called maybe slurs by like your opposing team. Like, who wants to deal with that? Like, it does seem like I completely understood when Colin was like, it's easier to not, you know, come out and like make this a whole thing.
Well, especially if you're in like Colin's position, who's not a captain, who's not like the star of the team. Like, why do you want the spotlight on yourself if you just want to play soccer or football? Like, I'm sure there are players where like, I just want to play this sport. Because, like, besides like acting, let's say acting, you're there kind of knowing you're going to have the spotlight because you're an actor. They're seeing your face a lot. With a sport, you're like you could just be really talented at that sport and really never want to see the spotlight ever. I'm not saying all
Yeah,
actors do, but
no.
there's such a bigger part of that. Like with sports, you could kind of tell like, well, if I don't really want to be in the spotlight, why would I put myself more into it?
Yeah, no, I totally understand, like, and agree, like, the actors do kinda go into it knowing that, like, yeah, people, if I become a big enough actor, people are gonna have, like, a certain amount of interest in my personal life, like, I think it's part and parcel. I'm not saying all actors are like attention or anything like that, but I think there is a little bit of that in there, right? Like, there is, like, a certain amount of, like, I do like attention, I like to be on stage, I like to have an
Mm,
audience. No, I don't know that that's necessarily always the case with, like, professional sports
sports.
players. Like, yeah, you're right, like, maybe they just love the game, like, they love the sports. The celebrity aspect of it is probably not what all of them are as comfortable with or as excited about, and so, yeah, like, I think Collins, he's not the star, he's not Jamie, right? He's not like a Roy Kent, he's not even like the team captain. He's just on the team, he just really likes playing. In fact, like, I think earlier in the season, he was, like, only doing very medium. So
He's not the worst player, but he's also not the best player. He's in a weird
exactly.
situation where it's
Yeah.
just like, do I need to come out as gay? I don't know. And I think that is interesting. I'm curious to see, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, how that's gonna be. But yeah, sometimes it's not worth it because I remember, and this is more recently, there was this football player who came out, and I think he's still in the NFL. And I was looking at comments, and no one was being homophobic about it. Like, they weren't like, he's gay, that's weird. Not saying no one, but at least in the
Yeah.
comments, it wasn't like forwardly homophobic, but they're just pretty much saying this is homophobic, but not to the extent you think it's gonna be. But it's just like, yeah, like, well, he wasn't very good, and he's saying this that way he can stay on the team. And I don't know if he was good or not. I don't know much about football, but it was
Yeah.
just like that was what they were saying is like, oh well, this is news now, and if he says this, it's gonna be harder to kick him off.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
I
I
mean, that
think
is homophobic, but it's a different
It
type of
it is.
homophobia.
It's a different type, but I think there is almost something to that where it's like, if you're sort of a middle of the pack player and you're just kind of enjoying your life and, like, the spotlight's not really on you, like, the second you say that I'm gay, suddenly, like, there's gonna be a lot more eyes on you paying attention to what you do, and, like, suddenly now you're, like, representing something, right? So then does it, like, is your on-field performance, like, more or less important now, right? Like, I think that there's really thorny issues that I appreciated them, like, having Colin be like, "I just wanna go out there and play, like, I don't want all of this extra stuff on me." I think it's, like, really reasonable perspective to have.
But then there is also the reverse, because again, I know we're talking one side of the fence, and then there's the other side of the fence. As a queer person, it's just like, oh, well, wouldn't you want that role model out there? Like, it's like you're queer, and you're like, oh, well, I like soccer. Can I be queer and like soccer? So there is this, but I'm kind of in this circumstance, I'm glad they didn't tell that story because I feel like that's the go-to story you would tell, and the story you see a lot. Even that Bachelor guy, what's his face, who was like a football player, and then he
Ah.
what the
I don't
fuck's
think I
it?
know about this.
Colton. He like had his own show. He's gay. He was like a
Oh,
bachelor. Yeah, he was on The Bachelor, and he was
was he
gay, but
a gay bachelor?
yeah, but he didn't know he was gay at the well, maybe he did know he was gay at the point, but he like he wasn't out to himself, and then he like figured out he was gay
Oh,
later. But he was like on the Bachelor television show. He's gay.
interesting.
But anyways, he used to play football, and then he was talking about like I don't even know how I got here, but but yeah, he was talking about like, okay, what spotlight do you have? Like, are you a role model because you're like coming out. He also has a lot of other baggage that maybe he also like the girl that he was going out with from The Bachelor. He like stalked her and did some stuff. So he also has some other baggage
Colin,
that he should be playing. So I don't
Colin,
know if he
what you doing?
yeah, I don't know if he could be a role model, but I think that he made a whole Netflix show where he's talking about like how can he be a role model because he was talking about like sports and gayness and like
Yeah.
there's an episode where he comes out to his like football coach and like he's like that was as hard as like coming out to my dad and then like is again taking away all the baggage is that like a role model to people to be like okay well I played football and I look like this type of person, can I be gay and be out? And that's interesting, but I do think that's a story that's easier to go to, I think, because I think that's the obvious story to tell.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think like, yeah, there is something to say about like every time, you open a door and tell people who you are, it's easier for the person behind you to do that. And
Mhm.
especially like in something that's so charged as like professional sports where it's still kind of taboo and still not as accepted, like, yeah, that would make a big difference. But yeah, I do think that that's usually the story. It's usually, coming out and like and the media attention and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas like I do like that the Ted Lasso version was like more grounded in like the thing that he was really worried about was like, are my friends still gonna like me? Or is the team gonna feel like I let them down? And that kind of stuff. And so I'm not sure I 100% love the way that they did that one episode with I think it's McAdoo, right? Where the
Mhm.
the team leader where he like kind of gives him the cold shoulder and like later it's you learn it's because he was upset that Colin didn't feel like he could tell him. And I was like, yeah, but still like I feel like
He didn't handle it well.
is there like no knowledge that something like that would be like incredibly hard and stressful and scary for that person? Like maybe we just step aside with our feelings and we just kind of center them. I was like,
But
but
some people
okay.
aren't like that. This
That's
was more
true.
realistic. There's a lot of people that would make it about
Yeah,
themselves.
exactly. It's like
So
I was like, McAdoo, are we a little bit self-involved?
maybe just a little
Just
bit,
a bit.
just a little. But I mean, it's something that could be again something that someone could do. So I thought that was interesting. And something I was gonna say, I find it very interesting that Ted Lasso is not really a show that focuses on the media aspect of these characters because
Yeah,
like you can
that's
even think
true.
about like Jamie and Roy, like you kind of have an idea that they're famous, but not really.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the most that they kind of talk about like the fame aspect. We know Jamie is somewhat famous because of his stupid reality show
Right.
that he left a really good team to go do. And we know that Roy is well known because he was like briefly a commentator, which that storyline was hilarious. I think that was in like the second season when he
It
was like doing
was.
doing color commentary for football. But besides that, yeah, I don't think that there's, they had those like banter ads that they did and like some of the PR stuff that Keely did, but like yeah, there's not as big of a focus on like what the media apparatus is really around them because like we see like Ted just like walking around, just talking to the locals and stuff like that. So it feels like they're sort of famous, but like not super famous.
Because they're also I think someone we know is that the team until up till now was not good.
That's
So I think
true.
they're just
Yeah, they're
like
very
they're kind of
medium.
like yeah, so maybe they're like also just the minor leagues of soccer, which I think they were until the last season, but then it also kind of confuses me. Well, Jamie was on a different team. He was on the team that Rupert what I think, yeah, Rupert's team. I think he was a part of. Maybe he was part of another team. So I guess that's how they became more famous. And I think Roy was on another team as well before Richmond. So I think that's why they're more famous than the actual team they're on. But Ted, yeah, he can say hi to anybody he wants, and not
Ted's just
even those
wandering
fans,
around. And
even
yeah,
those fans, they're friends with them.
inviting the fans at the local pub to like watch practice and stuff like that. I think that's why it's like it's hard to imagine like, oh, there would be like a media firestorm around this because it's like, yeah, I mean, he just kind of like lets the local fans like come hang out and watch practice. It doesn't seem like there's like a lot of safeguards in place for whatever's happening there at Richmond.
Definitely not. But that's also like the charm of the show, obviously. I think another
Yeah.
show would have been like, let's see how they're famous. I'm like, I don't actually care
No,
that
I wouldn't
much.
wanna watch the version of the show where, like, Ted Lasso, like, walks out of the Richmond and puts on his sunglasses and gets into his armored vehicle or whatever and, like, speeds off. I did think it was funny at the end, like, I think it was, like, the last episode where Rebecca was like, "I could make you very rich. I could make you the most well-paid,
And he's like, nah.
coach in, in professional soccer," and he's like, "Nah, I'm good." But, like, yeah, I mean, there is definitely it's, like, some amount of, like, knowledge that, like, yeah, these are pretty well paid people, but Ted's just kinda ambling around and handing people cookies, so
And also Rebecca is super rich to a point where she like saves her best friend's whole entire business. So it's just like she's an interesting character when it comes to money because she also doesn't seem like she cares about money that much, but maybe because she's so rich.
yeah. Yeah, I think that is pretty funny that, like, she's, like, bailed out Keely at the last minute. She just had all this money, and we do actually I think it was I can't remember if it was I think it was the episode before the finale
Mhm.
where, they're trying to get together this, like, new league that's gonna be like a billionaire league essentially of, like, just
Yes, yes.
terrible billionaires ruining everything like they did for many things, that we used to know and love. And she does, like, this speech about, like, how, the power of football and how everybody loves it and how, like, kinda
Like not
bringing you
about
back.
us.
Yeah, exactly, it's not about them, but yeah, like, she's in the room with the billionaires trying to ruin something, so, like, she's very rich.
She is very, very rich. She's a nice rich, but it's just always interesting to see.
I think that's, like, a good transition into the Keeley, aspect
Mhm.
of the season, which is that, like, we find out that Keeley is queer, and she has a relationship with a woman named Jack,
Who's so
who
nice and so mean at the same time. Okay.
yeah, I think that was what I was gonna say, like, let's talk about, like, the less complicated, storyline that, like, worked for me a lot better, and then, like, transition into the one that, like, weirdly worked for me a lot worse.
Right.
Yeah, the Jack and Keeley storyline, I think you could kinda see it coming, they were kinda making eyes at each other, but,
Right.
like, when y if y it was one of those things where it's like, you didn't wanna think about it too hard because, like, Jack is kind of her boss, so there's, like, a weird power stuff imbalance there that, like,
But
yeah,
this
I
show
guess
likes doing that. So I
it
was
does
already
because it had the Rebecca and Sam relationship there,
which is more
this
boss and
which is yeah, that one always struck me as, like, a little strange boss, there's a huge age difference, there's a lot going on with the Rebecca Sam thing, so they're obviously too hard about, like, is it weird to date somebody who is, like, financially invested in your company? Could that go astray in some way? And we find out from Keely's storyline that you probably shouldn't, and it definitely will.
and what's so interesting is there's moments again that there's this allegory of like, oh man, because she's gay, that's why like I'm ashamed to like let people see you. And it's like, nah, it's just because you had a sex tape that came out. And she's like, I don't want people to know we're going out. And I'm like, okay, interesting. Because again, what's so weird about Jack's character is that there's so many times where she's like perfect almost, where she's like, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
totally understand this. And she's like, so like communicates and tells the whole office this is what's going on. And you're like, whoa, she's the perfect girlfriend. And then there's just like this heel turn in the middle where like, what do we want to do with Jack? I guess I don't know. Let's maybe not have her be in this show anymore. And it's just like, wow, this is just such a weird character because like, how can you be so perfect and so not at the same time and just so quickly? And I like how Jamie and Roy react to it because I mean, I think they were both with her long enough to know that she was bi. But it's like, oh, she has a new girlfriend. And they both kind of react to it, which is interesting and nice. But um, I think they played her bisexuality well. Like I think they
Yeah.
did that portion well. I just don't know if Jack as a character. Like I'm glad they did it. Like it's so hard because I'm like, oh, again, you don't have to prove your bisexuality with
Yeah,
being
yeah.
like at all. But it's just like it was just an interesting thing to do. But she was a weird character.
Yeah, it was, like, one of those things where it was, like, complicated, where it's like, well, first off, I loved the relationship between Keely and Roy, and everyone did. So
Yeah.
already whenever you're introducing another love interest into that mix, like they are coming from a disadvantaged place, right? Like people are not going to be happy that she's
But the
not.
gays are. The
Yeah,
gays are
yeah,
happy she's
the
a girl.
gays are gonna be
So
happy, but, like, other people are gonna be pretty annoyed, they're already not gonna like this relationship, and then it just felt like it was, like, a very strangely written one where, like, I wanted to be excited, like, "Oh, it's so cool that Keely's bisexual and that they're letting her explore that, and that nobody's making a big deal out of the fact that she's, like, dating a woman." Like, there's nobody who's like, "Oh, it's weird that Keely is, like, dating her female boss." I'm like, "It's weird that she's dating her boss for sure," but, like,
yeah.
nobody focuses on the fact that it's like, "Oh, she's dating a woman." So I liked all of that, but it also kind of felt like, what was the point of it? I struggled with what the point of it was. It was like, it felt strange.
I
Jack's
think it was the
character,
proof for bisexuality, which is weird.
it is weird. It's like, is she bi if she hasn't dated both?
Right? And it's just like, well, and there were episodes where I rather have honestly a whole episode where, and obviously I like the Trent stuff, but there's a part of me, and I know Colin and Keely didn't interact, but there's part of me that wishes that she talked about her queerness more and just talked about like just being bi. We didn't have to
Yeah.
see her with anybody to talk about her being bi. I think I rather that than see the Jack thing. I don't know how she could have done it, but there could have been an episode about her being at a crossroads, not even a crossroads, just like an opportunity to talk about her bisexuality in some way that's more than a throwaway line.
I feel like they could have played the Jack thing, but they could have played it as, "Oh no, like my new boss is really cute and I'm
Mhm.
attracted to her and I don't want to like cross that professional line," without having it go into like a full relationship that got weird
Right.
at the end, because like obviously at some point like they had to make way for going back to the Jamie Roy Kent triangle for
Even
some
though that
reason.
didn't happen though,
Even
like, that's
though
the thing,
yeah,
it doesn't end that
it
way.
even though it ends with her like doing like a "I choose me,"
Well,
uh
she's like, "I choose a female soccer team, so I could choose all of them."
I choose them ladies. But yeah, like I just felt like it was like treading water. Like we were just wasting a little bit of time. We're gonna give her a girlfriend in between. And it was like a really strange, like her whole PR story, I think was strange as well. Like it didn't do a lot for me. It felt like it was taking like it felt like this it was on this island where it was like part of a different show almost, and like
The
I
spinoff.
would have yeah, the spinoff. I would have preferred that she would had just stayed at Richmond. I know that was like they were sort of trying to tell a story last year of like the supportive boss and like good ways to go and bad ways to go, with like sort of paralleling her and Nate, where like Nate wanted more responsibility and like kind of no one was paying attention. He went to the dark side, and like Rebecca really supported Keely and told her to go for that opportunity. Um, but yeah, I in theory, like I liked it, but then they had to like deal with her having her own PR agency. And instead it was just this like weird, wacky subplot that we'd be hanging out with everybody that we knew. And then Keely was off in this corner doing her own thing with her new friend Barbara, the financial
I
the
did like
financial
her.
girl. I do love
I enjoy
Barbara.
her.
I love
Yeah.
how much Barbara loves blood and blood
And
sport
rugby.
and rugby. But yeah, like the whole Jack storyline felt weird. They also kind of lampshaded that it wasn't going to work because early on she's like, I feel like she's love bombing me, which I've never heard the phrase love bombing in a
No.
positive way, right? Like it's always like he love bombed me, and then before I knew it, I was in a cult. It's not usually like he love bombed me and we've been married for 30 years.
Yeah, and
It's
also,
usually
like,
starts
the
out
stuff she
bad.
was yeah, the stuff she was doing was, like, kind, and also no, okay, when they started, it was bad, but the reason I say it was kind is the way it ended, because she's like, "Yeah, I just won't do it anymore." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So
Yeah,
she's good with that.
it was weird. It was also felt like the character, like they didn't really establish who this character was, or like what
She's
things like
Jack.
she would or wouldn't do. So like when she suddenly makes that turn where from being like really supportive of Keely to being like, "Ooh, you had a sex tape and that's weird and gross," and like being really like slut shamey and like really sex negative, and like it just felt like a weird turn for that character. It's like, really? She's like a prude now for some reason? Like, why? And then
I Didn't get
And
it.
I hate that they didn't even allow Keely the character progression and the character momentum to be the one who was like, "Get out of my house," and we're broken up. Instead, you have Keely, like, mooning about Jack in the next episode and being sad that Jack won't text her back, even though Jack said some, like, truly horrifically terrible things, like, right to her face in the episode before, and she's like, "Maybe Jack will text me back soon." I'm like, "Girl, self-respect." Like, this
Yeah.
is a character who we've seen have so much self-respect and, like, make such clear boundaries and, like, seem like she was going in a direction where she was, like, doing it for herself and opening her own agency, and then just kinda see her be such a, like a womp womp with Jack and, like, fall back so much, it was kind of disappointing. It felt like a step back for that character to have her be so, like, submissive around Jack almost. Like, I hated that one episode where, after the sex tape came out, where Jack, like, obviously disinvites her to this, like, fancy, gala because she's too embarrassing to bring around now, and then they go play miniature golf, and Keely
Yeah.
is fully wearing the, like, dress that Julia Roberts wears in Pretty Woman. I know this because I love Pretty Woman and most rom-coms, and I was like, "What's that supposed to be signifying?" That she's, like, wearing the Pretty Woman dress, and her friend catches them out there, and Jack is too embarrassed to say that Keely is her girlfriend. It was just so
And are they
strange.
girlfriends at this point too? Because that
I
also
don't
confused me
know.
because they seemed like they were going out for like 2 days. So I'm just like, are why are they girlfriends?
Yeah, it was weird to be like, how long has this relationship lasted? How long has Keely even had this PR agency? Why does she need such a big office space and
Oh
so
no.
many and so many people working for her if
And
she's
that
like a
one
brand
friend,
new and yeah, oh my God, Shandy. Don't even get me started on like what was the point of Shandy?
I was a little confused by her.
Yeah, it
But
feel
I
like
mean she brought some good comedy,
she
but
did. She was funny, but it felt like Jack, like, took this sudden, like, heel turn and turned into a villain because she kind of, like, needed to be a villain because
they just didn't know what to do with her.
shuffle her out. So it's like, well, she won't be accepting of Keely's, like, sex tape, and she'll slut shame her, and then she'll pull the funding, which is a terrible, terrible thing to like, she's just such a terrible person at the end of it, and, like,
It makes
it
no
didn't seem
sense.
yeah, there
Yeah,
was
with what she was doing before.
unless, like, their stance is all billionaires are bad, which I'm, like, on board for, but then, like, what do we do with Rebecca?
Yeah, she doesn't seem too bad, and she gives the money to Keely.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Roy Kent's probably really, really rich
Oh
too,
my
and he
god.
doesn't seem too bad either. So
Yeah, I'm sure that Roy has tons of money. I see it in the chat. Abby says, "It went in such a strange direction. Jack just disappeared after a few episodes." And then Abby says, "I think this is why the season felt really bumpy to me. A lot of passive character moments instead of characters driving their own stories, not just Keely, but with others too."
well, I think the struggle and something you definitely saw this season, not like again, I think other shows do it to a different extent in a lot worse way. I think Ted Lasso, for the most part, I think did a really good job at tying loose ends. But it's just not enough episodes, honestly. I think they just had not enough room to tell all the story they wanted to tell.
Well, yeah, I mean, each episode of this comedy was like an hour or
Mhm.
more. I would see the runtimes and I'd be like, "Is this a comedy anymore? It's an hour and 6 minutes? Like, what are you
They're
doing to me
movies.
here?" They were all little movies. I loved a lot of the episodes, like the Amsterdam episode I thought was so
Oh, love
much
that one.
fun. I love that, like, we got, like, not a bottle episode, but like a little just a self-contained story in the middle of the season. I thought that was really fun. I thought that there were, like, a lot of things that they did this season that were fun, but, like, yeah, you could tell that they were struggling like, juggle all the characters and all the storylines that they wanted to do and, like, move them forward and do that in the amount of episodes, and that's why, like, the runtime started getting longer and longer and
Even the
longer.
last episode, we had to like save it because we were gonna watch it like the day it came out, but we all got busy and we ended up watching it like the week after because it's just like, man, it's like an hour and a half or whatever it was. I'm like, that's pretty long. We don't have enough time. And I was really trying to stay away from spoilers on that one. And I didn't get spoiled somehow. I was very surprised.
Yeah, I think I watched it, like, the next day that it came out and, managed to avoid spoilers. Somehow I've managed to avoid spoilers for the end of Succession, and
Oh,
that, by the way, has been incredibly difficult. I've been ducking them like crazy.
no, I've even seen spoilers and I don't watch the show.
Exactly. It's everywhere. I feel like Ted Lasso is kind of the similar, like, a lot of people were talking about it, but, like, I watched it fast enough that I managed not to get spoiled, but, like
And there's a lot that happened, so you could get spoiled on one thing, and then there's, like, 5 other
exactly, and then
things you
it's like,
wouldn't get
"Oh,
spoiled
it's
on.
like, the other things don't like" yeah. I know one thing that happens, but I don't know everything that happens, but
What's so funny, we watched the episode where Keely and Jack are flirting, and we're all
uh-huh.
just and I think I even talked about it on this podcast, where I think it's so interesting where my parents have gone with television queerness. Like, 5 years ago, I don't think my mom would have thought like, "Oh, yeah, Keely and Jack are gonna be together." I think she'd be like, "Wow, really good friends." And then, like, her first thought, like, when she saw that scene, she's like, "Oh, yeah, I think Jack and Keely might, like, get together. That's interesting." And then we had to skip an episode because, like, something our schedules didn't line up, and we had to watch 2 episodes back to back. So the next episode they obviously got together, and I got spoiled for me. And I was like, "Oh man, like got spoiled." And I didn't care. So I was just
Yeah.
excited that they got together. At that point, I was excited. Didn't know where it was gonna go, but yeah, it's just interesting. Like, that did get spoiled for me before I actually got to watch it.
I do appreciate that, like, we're at a place in, like, TV history where, like, I will see 2 female characters with chemistry, and I'll think, "Hey, maybe those 2 characters are gonna get together. It looks like they're eyeing each other." Because previous to this, I would think, "Hey, those 2 characters have chemistry.
They'll
I'm
never
sure
get
nothing
together.
will ever happen for it." Supergirl. Like, it does feel kinda nice that, like, it feels like TV is coming along where they're like, yeah, like, we can have 2 characters that have chemistry, and if who cares if they're the same sex, like, let's do it. Like, I don't just automatically
Not with
assume,
men
like
as much, though.
that is
Not with
true,
men.
they're not really going there with men as much.
Yeah, that's really super interesting to see. One thing that's also interesting, and a spoiler alert for Gotham Knights. I don't watch it, but I saw the spoiler. But character like Stephanie Brown, who's supposedly straight in the comics, like, is kissing some girls on the show. So I'm like, oh,
Oh,
interesting that they
okay.
could go that route with a character that's also already kind of has her own thing in comics. So I thought that was
Yeah.
cool.
Nice that they could, like, maybe change, say some canon about the character, and, like, that's
It's
not
so
a big
weird.
deal. It's, weird that they could just play into some chemistry like that. I don't know
So
other
strange.
shows that maybe could have taken that path and just did not.
I think what is interesting about from what it seems with Gotham Knights compared to Supergirl is that Gotham Knights, I think the showrunner is gay, and they're just, like, really
Uh,
going for it with all the gayness. So it's just like, I guess there's a big difference of that too. Because I think the showrunner was from Batwoman, and then she, like, went on to do this. So, like, a
ah.
lot I think that's why they could be a little gayer. Also, the CW is dying, so they're probably like, "We can do
They're
whatever the fuck we want."
it's like a fire sale there. They're like, "What are you gonna do? Stop us? Everyone on this show's gay now."
And they're like, "I'm glad we could do it."
Ah, if only this had happened a little bit earlier for Cara Danvers and Lena Luthor.
Honestly, they might have been able to get away with
If
it.
the show was still on now, they would have no budget and all scenes would happen in one room, but it could
But
be
they will
much
kiss.
gayer. But they will finally kiss.
And you know what? I think most Supergirl fans will be like, "I could accept
I
that."
think a lot of Supergirl fans would be like, "I will take that trade." Already the budget wasn't great.
Yeah, I would rather them just be in a white room maybe.
Exactly. The whole show takes place in one room against the terrible green screen from Ted Lasso, but
They get to
that's your snap
kiss.
judgment, but Lena and Gar get to kiss. What do you choose?
I think we obviously picked the kiss on
I
that
think
one.
so, I think so, I think so. But yeah, I feel like the Keely and Jack story was just, like, a little weird. It just felt like it was going all over the place. I was like, "What?" So, okay, she's great now, but now she's a villain, and now she's even more of a villain. I wish that at the very least in this storyline, I wish that Keely had gotten to be like, "Get out of here, like, I choose me to Jack." Like, she was like, a pushover, when it came to Jack, and it was kind of depressing to see. It's like, this character is usually, like, a lot more active and, like, stands up for herself, and just to see her kind of, like, moon over this woman who was treating her very badly was kind of depressing.
No, for sure. But overall, I love Ted Lasso. I think honestly, it's just still one of the best shows that's out there. I can't think of a show that is written better right now. Can you think of a show you feel like is better written?
Oh, I mean, there's probably some shows, but I will say, like, I loved Ted Lasso. Like, I
Mm.
all the seasons I thought were really good. This one I thought was like more bumpy, but like again, these are never critiques I thought like while I was watching. It would be like
Which
after
is
the
always
episode.
good.
Yeah, after the episode would get off, I think, oh, no, didn't love the way that they did that storyline. But like I would just put it on and enjoy it. And I think that like
Mhm.
the characters and the universe that they created in Ted Lasso was, like, just such a nice place to visit. Like, I just wanna live in Richmond and, like, have cool friends who are billionaires, sure, but, like but, like, the characters, like, the way that the team interacted with each other, anytime that there'd be a scene with, like, all the soccer players, they were always so funny. Like, the Amsterdam episode, I think, was, like, a standout for me this season, and
The bike scene with Roy and Jamie.
yes, the bike scene and the team trying to pick what they're gonna do for their one night off in Amsterdam and, like, not being able to pick anything was, like, so relatable to me. It's like, there's so many options, I cannot choose which
So
option.
let's do nothing.
Let's do nothing. If you've ever been with a big group of people trying to choose what to do or even what to eat, it's a very relatable story. And I thought that they made like those characters, like all the players, even the background players, so lovable that like even if they didn't have like a lot of lines, like you would know who the character was and you would know his thing.
No, for sure. And yeah, it's a fun show. It's a show again, more about friendships and more about the relationship with yourself. And I don't think there's enough shows like that. And but it still feels kind. And something I like is that even though there is drama, like I do feel like everyone is somewhat of a good person. I think it shows that there are good people out there, even if you do bad things sometimes.
Yeah, I really liked the, like, fundamental kindness of the show. I think that's
Yeah.
sort of, like, the big takeaway from the show is, like, Ted Lasso is really kind, and that, uh, sort of rippled outwards into all of these people who he interacts with who then start to be kinder themselves and, like, start to, like, think about their own issues and things like that. I think, like, the character development this season, particularly of, like, Jamie, I thought Jamie had, like, a great season of, like, character development where, like, he's very different from when we met him
And
in the 3rd
earned.
season, and
Earned
very
rightfully
earned,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we watched him really go through, like, a full journey. It didn't feel like he just suddenly changed and became, like, a completely different person, and I really liked the journey that they took some of the characters on this season, and I just think, yeah, like, fundamentally, this show is just, like, such a nice place to visit. Like, I will definitely, like, rewatch it. If they do a spinoff, which I think Apple TV Plus, like, desperately wants to do, I'm gonna be watching that spinoff.
For sure, me too.
I don't care what it's about unless it's, like, about Jade, Nate's girlfriend, and then maybe I'll skip. Uh,
I wanna see the show about the Greek restaurant,
yeah,
well, the inner workings of
exactly.
that.
It's gonna be all about the restaurant, that they go to all the time, but just normal restaurant stuff, like refilling the salt shakers
It's
and
just Bear before Ted Lasso.
I hear that show have you seen that show?
It's the one that after my Michael Jordan documentary, I think I might
Mm.
watch it 'cause I love cooking shows, so I'm like,
Yeah,
that
me
might be the
too.
show for me, like, that's just my show, so that is next for on my list.
I can't remember, do you watch Top Chef?
No, but I've seen and it's like one of those shows that's, intimidating to me because there's so much of
Yeah,
it.
it's like 20 seasons.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, we ended up it's like one of Mike's favorite shows. So we watched a bunch during the pandemic when there
Mhm.
was nothing else to do. I think we watched like 15 seasons of Top Chef or something. So now I love it. But yeah, I feel like
I know some of the people that are on Top Chef because they do end up on the Food Network a lot. Like, I'll be like, "Oh,
oh,
they were the
I thought you
winner
were gonna
of
say
Top
you like
Chef?"
knew them personally. I was
Oh,
gonna be like,
no.
Kat, you've been holding out on me.
Oh, no, I wish. Then I'm getting some good meat. It's like, I watched them, like, on the Food Network channel. I'm like, "Oh, they were this winner of Top. That's interesting."
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think The Bear is definitely on my list of shows I have to watch too because it's all about chefy stuff, so I feel like
Love it.
that'll be fun. But
And I've
yeah,
been
I
seeing
mean,
good stuff about it, and it's a comedy, so it's short.
I know, Ted Lasso used to be a short
That's
comedy
true.
too, and then, like, this whole season, every episode was in, like, a full hour. I was like, "What are you guys doing to me?"
I'm glad I didn't binge watch it. I don't think I
Oh
would've
my
liked
god,
that as
no, yeah,
much.
me too. I don't think I could've I think I would've had to, like take breaks between the
No.
episodes if I try to binge it, because it's like I feel like this season worked a little bit better week to week,
For sure.
just because the episodes were so long. Like it was like,
Yeah.
oof,
It's a
these are
little mini movie.
they were little mini movies, especially that Amsterdam episode. That really felt like a little mini movie to
Mhm.
me.
Yep.
But yeah, I would watch whatever spinoff they are probably currently or will at some point be pitching after the writer's strike is over for
It'll
Ted
take a little
Lasso.
while.
Yeah, because
Let's
I assume that Jason Sudeikis doesn't want to do it anymore, and that's why it's ending
I
now.
think
But
so, and I think that's okay. I think what I liked about the show so much is that it did end, and that like no, because there's some shows that just don't know when, and they're just
that's
like
really true.
they don't know how to go on top, and they this I think the show really did go out at its peak, and I like that, and I don't mind the spinoffs if it doesn't have to do with Ted. Like I really want a spinoff that is obviously still about sports, but just not as much like this show because I want it to be something very different. It's interesting because when we were talking about like I forgot we were talking about some subject that made me think about this, but there's some sports that I feel like could be really interesting TV shows. Like we're rugby. So the
Oh,
character that does the
yeah,
blood. No, I don't know anything about rugby. I just know that
neither
it's a
do
really
I.
violent sport. And I'm like, oh, that could be a really interesting show because it's like we've seen all the basketballs, we've seen all the baseball stuff. Why not do stuff like pickleball? I want to see a pickleball show.
Oh no, the drama and the heartbreak of pickleball.
Yeah, like
um,
I would watch it because also something I was literally I fell asleep a little bit before. Again, I've been really tired lately. I was like, I have 20 minutes before we have to record
I can
this.
take a power nap.
And something I love doing when I try to go to sleep is that I don't love watching shows that have narratives. I'll watch like a sport, but not like your average sport, not like your football, like I'll watch basketball because I really do like basketball, but I'll watch like softball. I'll watch pickleball, I'll watch bowling, I'll watch they do cornholio, the what cornhole. I'll watch
Cornhole.
that. I'll watch poker because I'm just like, it's so weird. And so
Oh,
before
Kat, I
I
got a
came
great
on, I
one.
did
I got a
pickleball.
great one
Oh,
for
tell
you.
me.
Okay,
Okay.
have you ever seen? Are you ready for this?
Mhm.
Competitive tag.
Yes, I have, and it's so great.
It's so good. Oh my god, it's so
I
good.
remember I was in a hotel with Phil, and I'm revealing, but he snores a little bit. So I sometimes have to put the TV on that way I like could I could go to sleep. So we were watching competitive tag and they make a lot of noises. They're like brr, 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 brr. And
They
Phil's
do.
like, and he could go to sleep. He could go to sleep so soundly, and he's like, you gotta change the channel. Put on anything else.
I remember like a couple years ago, I watched like a Canadian sitcom about curling, and I just thought to myself, "Man, there should be more sitcoms about curling. Let's get
Sure.
a bunch of sitcoms about curling. That's what I want. That's what I
I want
request.
I
Where's the
do. I
Ted
want to
Lasso of curling?
Where's the Ted Lasso curling? I want to see more about sports that you might not know the culture about. I think that's what I was
Yeah,
saying about pickleball because I think enough people know what it is, and for people that don't know, it's just
pickleball's
tennis,
taken
but
off. Yeah,
it's taking off. It's tennis that's also ping pong. That's it. That's literally what it is. Like big people. It's like you are on a ping pong table and you are playing. And I was like, oh, that's like super interesting because it's such a new sport. And also again, I was watching the cornhole. Right, I was watching my cornhole. The professional tag, you do have to be like kind of young because you gotta. It's like almost
yeah.
like American Ninja Warrior. You gotta be like fat. It's parkour. That's what the
You,
professional tag is.
yeah. Essentially, it's parkour. It's
But
parkour and just running, just flat running.
But cornhole and also axe throwing, you're seeing like these 50-year-old men or
I know. Just
women, and they're just throwing stuff, and you're like, whoa, they're professional cornhole people, and they're like 50, and they're professional sportsmen, sports
I
people.
I just want like a sitcom about every sport that's in the Winter Olympics. Like,
Yes,
where is my
bobsledding.
like bobsledding? Where is my like snowboarding? I think there could be a good sitcom for every Winter Olympic sport.
Yeah, I just feel like we have too many baseball movies. We have too many. I don't know if we have too many basketball movies, but maybe we do. I think we do. I love basketball, but like we have too many of them. I really do want to see the professional tag and like how does someone become a professional tagger? Like what is like how do you
What
get
goes
there?
into it? What's the training? What is the
Yeah.
training? We went to go see into the Across the Spider Verse.
Right.
Okay.
Crossovers.
And we saw a preview for like a movie that's like a NASCAR or like an indie movie, but like
Okay.
he started out by playing video games and
I
then
like
he
that.
learned how to drive on the video game and then he became like an actual driver and they were like, "This ain't no video game." But like, yeah, give me the movie about the professional esports video game.
Yeah.
How do
Honestly,
you make that exciting? I'm
I could see
willing to find
people
out.
doing that too. Like I could see people like that could be the next in the next 5 years. There's an esports movie out there, I am sure.
It's
But yeah,
coming. The League of Legends movie is on its way.
because sports are so interesting. Because sports, what I always say about sports stories, and it's again having a writing partner who does not like writing sports stories by any means, hates writing sports stories. It's so interesting because I love sports stories to the point of it's not really about sports. That's I think the best sports stories like Ted Lasso. I've been telling Phil you have to like watch Ted Lasso. He's like, no, I don't really like soccer. I'm like, it's not about soccer. It's literally not. They do not play soccer very often. Like the best sports stories are about how you could be a better person, like how it's always about character before it is about the sport, and I want to see that with a sport that no one knows.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I think that would be amazing. Yeah, like, yeah, I mean, I think to your point, like, every time I try to, like, pitch somebody on, like, Friday Night Lights, they're like, "Oh, I'm not that into football." I'm like, "It's not about football. Texas forever, man." They're like, "I don't know what that means." And they're but, like, I was like, "Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose." But yeah, yeah, these sports shows and movies, they're not really just about the sport, they're about, like,
That's
the
boring.
drama. Yeah, yeah, like, pushing through adversity and, like, building character and, like, you know, you know, competition and stuff. I think it's like sports kind of have built-in drama in them, so you can,
Yeah.
like, add some, like, character stuff around it, but, like, you still have, like, the big game to get to.
Because it doesn't even like even Ted Lasso, it never mattered who won.
No.
It was never really never mattered. Sometimes I was like, "What league are we up to? Are we in the finals? Who knows?" Because it really did not matter. And I was talking about like the Michael Jordan documentary, and it's just like the Last Dance I've been watching, and it's an interesting documentary because like you have to like sports to enjoy it, but it's not about sports. Like
Mhm.
you're obviously enjoying like watching him play basketball and stuff like that, and like but it's really about this guy who just wants to win and will do everything in his power to win and maybe has the highest tolerance in the world to want to win, and that's the story, and yeah, I always like looking at the narrative a little deeper. And then there's so many like BL or GL books, like queer books are about like, oh, let's see this this sports story too. Like there's so many subgenres of sports stories, and I'm glad that they're coming back. I feel like for a long time, well, honestly, I think for like 20 years we didn't have sports
Yeah,
stories.
there really hasn't been a lot of, like, sports stuff recently, and I do like that, like, we're getting more, it
Air,
feels like. Air,
love that movie.
I feel like I've seen, like, a couple of previews for, like, stuff that's coming out that, like, sounds like it's, like,
Mhm.
sports stuff, and I'm like, yeah, like, I might not be, like, biggest sports fan of, like, putting on, like, a football game or a
Mm.
baseball game all the time, but, like, if you give it to me in, like, a narrative form, like, oh, yeah, I wanna know that. I would probably be more likely to, like, watch the long Michael Jordan documentary than to, like, actually, like, watch a basketball game, which is terrible to say, but, like, there's built-in narrative to that, like, you don't have to, like, reach for, like, okay, you don't know need to know all this backstory about this
No,
player and that
they tell
player
you
and,
about it.
this person who got, injured and that person. Like, the story will just unfold for you, and I appreciate that about the sports movies because I think there is, like, a lot of, like, drama and really fun, exciting stuff in the world of sports, and, like, they're cinematic. They could make good movies and TV shows.
I want to see a softball show
Yes.
or
Ha
movie.
have you watched the new League of Their Own?
I watched
It's
the
not
pilot
softball.
of it and then it got canceled.
I
So I
haven't
was like, maybe
I
I should
haven't
watch
watched
more.
it. I know, I haven't watched it yet. I was planning to, and then I got behind, and then it got canceled, and I was like, "Well, I
No.
guess it's, like, not as high on the list now, unfortunately," but
It
that
also
would
was a period piece, so and I liked
Oh,
it,
that's
but
right.
I was just like, it wasn't like if I was watching softball of 2023.
If you were
What's
watching
that story about?
a modern softball
'Cause, like, I wanna
drama.
know what that's about. Because what's so interesting about that sport is that from what I can understand, I'm not a softball expert. Softball experts, you could tell me. It's, like, one of the only sports that you can't really go pro after you go to college. Like college is like the biggest
Oh,
arena.
really?
Yeah, I don't think there's a pro softball league, and if
You're
there is,
probably right. I've
they're
never
not
heard
like
of
very
one.
popular. Like maybe there is one, but they're not like it's not like baseball, or even like you have at least like the WNBA. Like if you do really, really well in basketball as a woman in college, you could go. I mean, you're not getting paid as much by any means, and you're not maybe getting the spotlight as much, but you can be
No.
part of that, part of that team. Soccer, the same thing. You could go into the Olympics. You could do these things. I don't even know if there's an Olympics for the softball.
I don't either.
So I'm just like, oh, that's interesting.
That would be fun. That would be like that could also be like a good comedy too, especially if it's like in college is like this is our Super
Mhm.
Bowl of
Like, this is the
these
major
are
leagues. It's like, but we're
these are our
18.
Olympics. Yeah.
It's like we're 18
Uh,
years old and we're like trying to be these softball players. Like, no, we like think about it also is like these are like the highest people of their caliber, and they're also just like going to college classes.
I'm now looking up professional softball to see if there is a professional softball and
My lullaby
I
of
guess
softball has made me very interested in softball, even though I know nothing about softball.
okay, so there is it's a women's professional fast pitch is the official professional
Mm,
softball league in the United States. So I
interesting.
guess there is a way to go professional. I would not assume that you would make much money
Or any.
doing this, or any money at all. They only have 24,000 Instagram followers, so
Yeah,
like
so I
times
don't think they're too
times are tough.
professional.
Yeah. Yeah, you're probably tapping out at college, let's be honest.
Because they were actually like showing a lot. I guess it was like their finals or something, and they were showing like a lot of it. I'm like, oh my god, I'm invested. And then I was going to sleep, and there was this one pitcher they're like, she's the best pitcher ever, or like she's the
Ooh.
best pitcher of the year. I'm like, what's making her so good? I'm like, I was invested, and something I was really invested in was that they kept looking at their arm. There was like this thing they kept reading, and I'm like, what is this like robotic flap? And it's like in softball, which I didn't know, and supposedly it's new because I was like, what is this thing? It's like plays that you could read on your arm.
What?
And you could like look at your pitching coach and they'll tell you what play you should do. And then you look at the play, you do it.
Oh my god, that's
And
intense.
the softball forums are saying they shouldn't have these anymore because it's like, oh, it's not like the old days of
You had to
softball.
memorize your plays back in the day. These kids with their play watches.
And guys, let me remind you, I don't know anything about softball. I've watched it for a week as
I
I've been going to
I
bed.
I truly hope that we get, like, really hot take emails about how wrong we are about everything that sports that we've just talked about, where people are like, "I don't know what you have been watching."
It was
Softball is
not,
actually a super big deal. I want those
and
emails
it
so
is an Olympic
badly.
sport. I've got a
It is an
gold
Olympic
medal.
sport. How dare you? As a golden medalist in softball, I am offended. Well, I think that's probably gonna wrap us up for Ted Lasso. I did
Probably.
wanna, say, Abby's comment here in the chat that the new, League of Their Own is super gay,
I have heard.
which I have heard, which is why it was on my list. I also heard it was really good. But yeah, I think, any last I was gonna say, last comments on Ted
Just
Lasso?
want to see Keely join a softball team. That's all I'm really looking for. I don't even want I don't even want ladies soccer. I'm done.
Ladies soccer,
No,
we're
change
off
it.
that now. It's gonna be ladies softball. And there's gonna be a love triangle, with Keely and, like, a bunch of the players, just maybe
Yeah,
multiple, maybe not even a
and
triangle, maybe like a square.
it's the whole team
The whole
actually.
team just loves
And they all
Keely.
have the wristbands, and
They
it's all
all
about like how to get to Keely's heart.
and then there's people posting on the forums that are like, "These wristbands are awful. How dare they?" I think that's gonna be, an amazing spinoff. I can't wait to watch it. As soon
Me
as the
too.
writer strike is over, I say we pitch this and we just make ourselves some gold.
Apple Plus needs us.
Apple Plus needs us. We've got great ideas.
We
We've got
do.
so many sports stories for them. We've got the pickleball, we've got the
Rugby.
softball, we've got curling. all of the Olympic
Tag.
sports. Tag. It's going to be amazing. And just call us. Call us.
We're here. We know nothing about any of these sports, but
we
we'll
can
learn.
Google the sports and know as much as Wikipedia will tell us, and then we're going to make an amazing story for you.
I'm ready for it.
Oh man, that's amazing. Okay, so reminder that you can follow us on multiple social medias. We are at the Legendary Ladies on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. I believe we're Legendary Ladies Pod. On Twitter, we are at the
You have a
Legends
new Twitter.
_ podcast. Good call, Kat. We have a new Twitter. So if you were following our previous Twitter and you're like, that sounds like the same Twitter name, of course I'm following you. You're not. We have a brand new Twitter. It's sparkly and fresh, and you should make sure that you go follow at Legends _ podcast. I don't know why I'm struggling with that name. We've had it for like 6 years now.
And it's one of the more simpler ones.
It is one of the simpler ones that we have. And yet I'm like, what is the name of it called? And we also are on TikTok now. We are officially the youth. We are TikToking. So you can find us there at Legendary Ladies Pod. So just, follow us around the internet and say hello. And you can also always email us you can't email us by starting it with @ that's not going to get you anything.
You can try.
You can try. I'm not going to stop you, but we are the Legendary Ladies at gmail.com. So if you have maybe some like gentle corrections about how wrong we were about most sports in this,
I will cry
episode.
if I find out I'm wrong about the wristbands.
Kat needs the wristband, so maybe like don't correct her about that. But like I'm sure we were wrong about almost everything else. So feel free to write in and help us out on that one. And
I feel like someone that listens definitely has played softball.
I cannot tell you how much I desperately want to get an email that's like, I play softball all the time. You were very, very wrong about everything that you said.
Or very, very right. I only want either one. I don't want to be in the middle. I can't handle that.
So I see that in the email we had an email from Daryl who was talking about the podcast episode we did on Will They Won't They, which is kind of interesting because like we kind of talked about the Rory, Keely, Jamie of it all.
I thought you said it's kind of interesting because I wasn't on that episode.
It's kind of interesting because I hear that episode was great, but I don't know personally. I wasn't there. But Daryl says, some shows do the will they, won't they for so long they don't get the couple together until the final episode. On the animated side, and Kim Possible, so the drama, Ron and Kim don't get together until the end, and the show was never...
They're the whole final season with them together.
Really? Interesting. Yeah. Daryl, I think you're wrong.
And trust me, it's not like softball facts. I do know about
actually, okay, so Daryl maybe wasn't wrong, and I just didn't finish reading. He says Rod and Kim don't get together until the end, and the show was never actually meant to have a 4th season.
There you go. Yes.
So that explains it. On the action side in Warehouse 13, Mika, I'm hopefully pronouncing that right, doesn't realize her feelings for Pete until the series finale and they get together. My theory is that when the couple is brought together in the final episode, it means that the writers never actually wanted to write for the pairing beyond the will they, won't they stage. Yep. Or they didn't know how to keep them interesting and they thought that like happy couples aren't interesting. So they decided not to put them together. I find the sort of like the insanely drag out will they, won't they to be a little bit of a drag. Yeah. Which is why I didn't love the Rory and Keely stuff this season. I was like, I liked them in season 2 when they were like just together. But like this season, I was like, oh my God, like either get them together or stop it with this.
I very much agree.
So, Kat, where can people find you on the internet? Do you have a Kickstarter to plug?
I know they're either live or they're coming because we're recording this a little early. So I do have 2 Kickstarters going on. So if you want enamel pins, we have enamel pins for lesbian, pansexual, and non-binary, and that's included with the other ones where we have, which is trans, a lot of bi. What else do we have? We have ace, and gay. So we got a lot of enamel pins that maybe you identify as, and they have little cute animals. So definitely go check that out. If you're a lesbian, you want a tiger animal, get it. If you are trans, you want a fox animal, get it.
What's the bi animal?
Cat and dog.
Oh yeah. I think I have
Yeah.
the cat. I was like, well, this is perfect for me.
Yeah. Now the cat is definitely a bestseller. I would say the bestseller is actually the trans fox is our bestseller. I'm curious to see what's going to be the bestseller of our new set. That it's either live or is going to be live. Other thing we have is, of course, comics. Slice Life issue 4 comes out, might be out. If you like Will They Won't They's, they finally kiss. So go check out that.
That is exciting. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Mojotastic, and you can also find me as a co-host on Supergirl Radio, where I'm not sure when this episode is going to come out exactly or what we'll be doing at that point. But you like Supergirl, right? Right? You do. So you should listen to the show. I think we're also going to be watching the Flash movie and talking about that. We have been sold a bill of goods that is the greatest movie of all time. So we are excited for it, and we're wondering if it's going to live up to the hype. So who knows? And I think that is going to do it for this episode. But until next time, stay legendary.